As the G7 meeting convenes in Cornwall, now is the time for Boris Johnson to take a leading role in international resistance against the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. While our allies in Europe hedge their bets between Washington and Beijing, Brexit has enabled Britain to look beyond the continent and to begin the process of resisting Chinese aggression and expansion worldwide. My name is Matthew Henderson. I'm a former British diplomat. President Biden has said that the world has reached an inflection point in a struggle between democracy and autocracy.
I believe that every ounce of my being that democracy will and must prevail.
He is certainly right, and it is for this reason that Boris Johnson should seize this opportunity to challenge Beijing. Earlier this year, the British government published its integrated review, a wish list of policy objectives, which says that Britain will work with allies and partners to protect the open international order from rival powers such as China, which the review somewhat cautiously calls a systemic competitor. This sort of language creates a balancing act, on the one side attempting to keep the CCP in check, and on the other to maintain or even strengthen bilateral economic ties. Right now, China could indeed be called a systemic competitor, but this approach risks seriously downplaying strategic threats posed by the CCP.
The Chinese counterintelligence threat is the greatest threat, certainly the greatest counterintelligence threat that we face as a country.
Let us be very clear. The CCP state is an authoritarian regime which persecutes millions of its own citizens, which brutalizes the people of Hong Kong. It bullies, bribes and subverts vulnerable countries for expansionist purposes. It colludes with other authoritarian opponents of free world democracy, bombards its critics with high-level disinformation and influence campaigns, and above all, has consistently lied about its appalling failure to report and properly manage a disastrous epidemic before it started spreading across the globe. We must remain true to our principles. But if that lot is systemic competition, then we and our partners surely ought to be doing a bit of systemic competition of our own. Just let us consider what Xi Jinping is really trying to achieve. Facing the underlying failure of his domestic economic policies, he has used his so-called Belt and Road Initiative to fast forward the globalization of China's economic, political and military influence in direct competition with the West. This policy, missold as kinder and gentler to developing countries than raw US-led capitalism, has in reality triggered a tsunami of shoddy and costly infrastructure development, pollution, subversion, dependency and debt trap hegemony, all with the strategic aim of expanding Beijing's sphere of competitive influence to the West's disadvantage.
We'll confront China's economic abuses, counter its aggressive, coercive action to push back on China's attack on human rights, intellectual property, and global governance.
President Biden is doing his best to persuade EU member states to reset their approach to China. But apart from showing some solidarity recently in condemning human rights abuses in Xinjiang,
for the European Union, human rights and fundamental freedoms are non-negotiable.
the EU has not proved resilient in the face of Chinese political and economic pressures. By contrast, post-Brexit Britain is free to reshape and to expand its foreign relations. After all, Britain is a Security Council member of the United Nations. With a globally deployable nuclear deterrent, it enjoys instrumental relations with partners worldwide, over and beyond the Commonwealth. So Britain is well placed to play a part, even a leading role, in building a new international development structure to compete with CCP expansion and to help restore and revive the free and open world order. Importantly, the UK government is now actively promoting the Democracy's 10 concept, the D10, which is likely to be a key theme at the current G7 conference in the West Country. Crucially, the D10 would be able to counter the Russian and Chinese stranglehold on existing UN structures. It would provide a forum for deepening trust-based partnerships around the world on a range of economic, political and security fronts. This is no longer simply a bilateral issue for Britain. Britain can no longer justify paying more heed to repairing its tattered economic relations with China than it does on coming up with a comprehensive strategic response to the CCP's revisionist plans for global control. Not before time. Self-deluding dreams of a Sino-British economic golden era have faded away in the harsh dawn of a post-COVID world. To make a reality of global Britain, the UK government must wake up to what the CCP state is trying to do, and must come up with a coherent counter-strategy in close accord with all its allies and partners. And Boris Johnson now has the chance to take a leading part in a historical process of resistance and revival.